Good morning and welcome to our Pan-African Friday. My name is Jagenda Semakola Ziksoka. On this 15th day of this month of October in this year 2021. What another lovely day. It's cold in Kampala. It's cold in Kampala and of course most parts of the Kampala metropolitan. It is rainy season. We just want to prepare you for this season, but to also remind you that COVID is still with us and let's do what we can do to kick COVID out of this country. The drive now is to go and get vaccinated anywhere and everywhere that you find a vaccination center point. Make sure that you do that. When you vaccinate, don't think everything is done and over. We still continue observing and adhering to all the SOPs of washing our hands with water and soap, sanitizing, masking up in public, and of course trying to keep a social distance as we can. Vaccination is one of the ways to go, but it's not everything. So after vaccination, we still need to continue adhering to the standard operating procedures and of course all the other guidelines given to us by the Ministry of Health and the health experts. Now welcome to our Pan-African Friday today, where we get into the discussion of managing nutrition and food security in Uganda and of course on the continent of Africa in our Pan-African Friday. Now my panelists of course are with me in studios, but I'll start with the guest, Ndugu Ampe Gaston from the Department of Food Technology and Nutrition from Makere University and also Secretary General of the Nutrition Society of Uganda. You're welcome, Mr. Ampe.
Thank you. Good morning, viewers.
Well, thank you very much. Happy to see you and happy to have you here. And of course, we'll also take the opportunity to engage and welcome Mr. Joseph Ngobi from the Ministry of Agriculture, Animal Industry and Fisheries. Welcome, sir.
Good morning, viewers. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, later, we'll also get another guest on Zoom, Ms. Nagawa Margaret, from the Action Against Anger. But with me in studios, of course, the panelists, Ndugu James Mututa, welcome.
Yes, Santi. Good morning, viewers.
Thank you very much. And I call Mande Amazima Karibu.
Asante sana.
Let me start with you.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I say this has been a good week, and you know, every 14th of October, that is the Mwalimu Julius Nyerere Day. That is the day when actually he died in 1999, and Tanzanians and of course Pan-Africans have actually gazetted the day as Nyerere Day, remembering his contribution to the continent, to the liberation of continent, and of course how he laid his stone on building Pan-Africanism.
Very important.
Yes.
Welcome.
Yeah, it has been a tricky weekend, especially the last the last 2 days. You can't imagine that someone could spend 5 hours in jam in Kampala. In other words, a person would have left for Barala, Mbale, Torolo, will be in their houses when you are still stuck in the jam in Kampala.
In traffic jam.
Sometimes it is hard to understand, but it happens, and I think there is a lot that has to be done to ease the time for doing business in Kampala. That's becoming.
Well, just getting into our discussion this morning of nutrition and food security in Uganda and Africa. I'll just get you, Mr. Augustine here, from the Department of Food Technology and Nutrition of Makere University, and here is where we are today. We're talking about how we can manage our nutrition and food security in this country. You notice that this is one of the countries, that everybody looks to as a food basket, but yet again, we are in a country where people go hungry or go without enough meals. Sometimes, what explains this and what needs to be done from now and an expert academic angle?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Jagenda. What you have said is true. What happens in Uganda is almost like a contradiction. We have a lot of food. We are endowed with virtually everything to make sure we have enough food, good soils, good balanced climate for most crops, and most parts of the country we are able to do 2 seasons of crops. But we still find pockets of malnutrition in Uganda, so it's a bit of a challenge. But government and other development partners and civil society and indeed Ugandans are doing quite a lot to reverse this situation. And in fact, without painting a gloomy picture, we know, in fact, Uganda has tried to perform very well, because if you look at the demographic health survey of the year 2000, stunting, which is an indicator which government has chosen as the indicator to monitor closely, was actually at 45%. But the latest demographic survey report, which was published in 2017, it was done in 2016 but published in 2017, showed that stunting has reduced up to 29%. Now, if you look at the behavior of that indicator, stunting, maybe I should have also said what stunting is, because it's a technical term. It shows, it's one indicator that is used to monitor the growth of children. So it measures, it compares the height and age of a child. So if you have reached a certain age, but then you have not achieved a certain height, then you are stunted. So you find that you are short for age. So that indicator is a very, very important indicator, and we have tried to do well. That's a reduction of 14%, and that is a phenomenon actually, because if you look at Sub-Saharan Africa, which today we are discussing Africa, you find that the average is actually 7.5%. The reduction from 2000 up to now, stunting has on average has reduced by 7.5%. But here we are talking about 14%. It is only in South Africa, where they are ahead of us, they have managed to reduce theirs by 15.6%. So although we are not yet where we are supposed to be, we are in the right direction, and that's why I'm saying that stunting is something that measures so many things in society, because it is affected by virtually everything. Let it be agricultural production, let it be health, let it be governance, let it be human rights, let everything, all those things impact on the growth of children. So if we say there has been some improvement, it means there is something that is happening in terms of obviously economy has been growing, so it means all these are being reflected in that indicator. Yeah, so we are not yet where we are supposed to be, but if the players in the field keep doing what they are supposed to be doing, we are in the right direction.
Just hold it there. Let me hear from Ndugu Joseph here from the Minister of Agriculture. You notice that when you look at Uganda, for example, Uganda has almost 3/4 of arable land in the region here where we are. We talk about SDGs, the 17 SDGs, and specifically I think it's SDG 2 that talks about zero hunger. You're from the Minister of Agriculture. When we're talking, there are quite a number of things. When you get back into 2003, we look at the Maputo Protocol that talks about financing agriculture up to about 10%. Then we have the Malabo Declaration that comes on much later, I think in 2014, and all these others trying to enhance and to see how much we can improve our agriculture to solve these problems. Now, you also notice that over time there's been an improvement in systems, and of course trying to improve our agriculture, but the system still lingers with us in as far as food security and nutrition is concerned. What needs to be done now from you? Did you look at we as a country or as a continent achieving SDG 2 of zero hunger with everything that we have or everything that we do not have?
Yeah, thank you. I think what you brought on the table is very critical. But allow me to say that tomorrow is a World Food Day, and we have a theme: our actions, our future, better production, better nutrition, better environment, and better life. And that one...
better everything.
Yeah, better everything. Government has put in place enabling environment, like you're saying, committing itself to the international protocols that you've mentioned. Come down to Uganda, we have tried to put down policies. We have agriculture policy in place. We have agriculture extension policy in place, 2015. We have a nutritional policy. This is an enabling environment for all the players to use to make sure that we can reach what you're talking about. So as Minister of Agriculture, and as we look at tomorrow, it's not a celebration as per se, because people are talking of celebration, but it's a day to reflect on what we have done in terms of progress in food security in our communities, and then to rekindle the spirit among the population about the need to look at food. For example, if you look at the patterns of food in the urban area, it's quite different from the rural area. In the urban area, it's changing. And you find that there's a lot of taking on rice, becoming very, very, coming on the table for the people to take as food. If you can take an example today, rice is coming from Tanzania, our neighbor here. And now one wonders, don't we have rice? But the population and the changes of pattern of behavior of what we eat in the urban area now makes the market grow bigger. But what I want to come to, when we reach, we need to now to rally the population to take a kind of change of behavior in terms of what do we eat. Do we eat nutritious food, or do we eat for matter of eating food? Do we look at what comes on table? Because you are saying there are people who fail to get the 3 meals, but there are those who got the 3 meals. Do they look at the quality of the food that come on the table? Do they look at the pattern of the food that puts, so that what they eat generates enough energy to do the work that they're supposed to do? So why we need, and why me particularly come today here, is to look at our population, to call them to action, to say that we may say we have quite enough food, but then we should look beyond having food, but the behavior, how do we eat the food?
Do we have enough food in this country?
Looking at what he was telling you, now let me give an example. We have data that is in place, very, very recent. Our population is growing at 3.2, but 2.9 is only the gap. And that one gives you 0.3 to match the growth of population. But if you look at 0.3 in terms of enough food, and you compare to the region of Africa, where Sub-Saharan Africa, we have a problem, especially in terms of drought in some of the areas in the region. Look at Uganda and compare. It's relatively saying we have enough food. That gives you we are not very bad off.
Okay.
But then that tells me, take you to what the minister is doing. The behavior of how we handle the food, post-harvest handling. How do we manage our food? One friend of mine the other day was talking on one of the radio and said, we need to go back and to our viaji, you know, these...
The silos.
Yeah, the silos, at the family level. And I said, my friend, it's something you need to think about first.
Okay.
At this moment, in this era, do these work? Where somebody harvests food, put in the silo, and the next morning they're broken into it, and food is gone. So we need to think beyond the silos at the family level. Because then when our grandfathers were using them, there was relatively, even my grandfather would leave a bicycle at the courtyard. The following morning you get it and ride it. It doesn't happen today. So I want to say that if we can rally the population, rekindle their spirit to adapt to the changes of how we eat, what we need, even in terms of how much time do we put in growing food and having access for sale, that will make us reach where we want to reach. Otherwise, if we don't change this, the pattern and the behavior, we can talk about food and cows come home.
Akol, let's talk about food in Africa. Why could we, or why should we even get here and grapple with this? When you look into statistics, Ndugu Joseph has talked about our international commitments. There's so many protocols that we've appended our signatures to as countries. But you notice that these are not very easy things to actually come to reality. They are tall orders to us. The 203 Malabo Declaration, the protocol, the Malabo Protocol of 2014 and the other of the Maputo one, these are things that you notice that not so many countries on the continent of Africa actually can live to these, the realities of these whole things. And of course, with the challenges that we have here and there, back and forth, we still grapple with food. On the continent, with the very blessed, good weather, good everything, good soils, good everything, things that you do not find elsewhere in the world, and people still stand like the expert here says, people still go without food and all the things. What needs to be done?
Well, I thank you very much. Of course, when you talk about the issue of food security on the African continent, it is such a pertinent issue, a very, very, very serious one. Yeah, where because ideally, traditionally, Africans were known to put up mechanism of protecting their food or preserving their food, the granaries and so on. They had that kind of arrangement. And what is, there's always something that bothers me. Egypt is a desert, but they have more food than actually sub-Saharan Africa. Any other country in sub-Saharan Africa, and yet it is a desert. But because they have learned to utilize the waters of the Nile, so that they can have as much food as they can. Now, Somalia for about 10 years back, for about 2 decades, it was almost a stateless country. But surprisingly, they were the biggest suppliers of beef, of meat to the Middle East. So you can see, so these are some of the paradoxes, ironies we are living with as a continent. Now, the issue of food security, I think there's no way African governments can support Africans in ensuring that we have enough food without implementing the Maputo protocol. Because ideally, 70% of the countries on the African continent, the backbone of the economies is agriculture. And now one wonders why exactly they really don't invest much into agriculture. Then in terms of also the other issue of food security, our mothers, brothers, colleagues in the village, it's not only in Uganda here, it cuts across the continent, that somebody today has a very good harvest, 2-3 weeks down the road, they are starving because they have sold everything. You see, so now, now that people are being pushed into commercial farming without being trained, that even if even when you need the money, but you need to survive. Yes, because ideally what happens in most countries is that good harvest, 2-3 weeks down the road, the food is done. That even when it comes to when the next season is setting in, it is government again to provide the what they are going to plant. So I think people should be trained on how to balance. Yes, you need the money, you need to do ABCD, but also you need to survive, but also need to keep some seeds that you're actually going to you're going to replant at the next season. Then also finally, I think also our education system. Yes, the education system that demonizes agriculture, not only in Uganda, across the continent, the teachers need to review that. Agriculture should not be used as
a form of punishment.
When you come to school, yes, a form of punishment. You go dig. There was somebody who made a joke that in Australia, when a student comes late, they are given dry bread to eat. But when they tried it in Africa, even teachers were coming late. So
because they also wanted to get a piece of dry bread. Mututa, let's get to the conversation. What needs to be done?
The issue of food is going to be so crucial. In fact, it's now a high time the African leaders decided that we Africans should not be defined by any other aspects of life than what they have and hold. For example, you can now take it from this period we have gone through in the COVID. You realize that most of the economies of the world have crumbled, and Uganda too, and Africa. But one thing that has stood up for the African continent is the food factor. For example, in Kampala here, during those lockdowns, if we didn't have the food,
this country would have been, I think, worse than where we are. But because of the food we have now, I'm talking about the definition that were given by whoever defines Africa, poverty, see what. You realize that a man with his 1 acre or 2 acres of land in the village and his 1 cow and his chicken is not looked at as wealth, because he cannot even get this to go to the bank and get a loan. But you realize that with that 1 acre of his and with his plantation of matoke or cassava that has managed to support us during these lockdowns is something to be proud of. But where people are relying on paper money and that kind of sophistication, you realize they have had bigger problems than what we have. But also partly, it is maybe because of our nutrition, the way we have been feeding, that has also supported us through this pandemic. Because we have seen in countries where the diet is different from ours here, have really suffered. Now, my biggest problem I have with us now, because I'm also included in the government, we have been promoting a lot of programs. I've been talking about how to stop diseases, but I think we have not taken a lot of effort to teach our people on what to eat and how to eat. Because these foods that we need to be eaten are grown by the same people. But it is also very common in my village to find a person getting eggs to go and sell and buy waragi. It happens. Now, I think there also need to be a deliberate effort of teaching our people on how to eat and what to eat. We have seen this happen in countries beginning with Japan and Korea, now China, that this issue of obesity was not there because of their diet. They were eating their greens and their rice. But because of now modernization, when people started having other foods,
fast foods,
yes, most of the fast foods, and in fact, sometimes I also get worried when you are in the Western capitals where people are eating fries and chicken. That's the food for the poor that you can go in any store, and that is the first meal that you can have. Because you cannot afford to buy even fresh beans, we cannot afford fresh
that's
juice.
Why you rush for
Yes,
fries.
you have to go for fries because that's
and
the food for the worst.
It changes here.
Yes.
Fries here is
Now,
again
when
the
it
food
comes
for
here,
these bourgeoisies.
I sometimes say, what is happening? Because the last time I think I got, I was in London and I got chicken from one of these stores, from this, because they call it a combo. You have a number of pieces of chicken and with a bottle of soda or tea or chocolate or something like that. And you pay about $2 for the whole family.
Or £2.
Yes. Why? Because you cannot afford a decent meal in that place of the world.
That's why you go for. Hold it here. I've just been told that Margaret Nagawa is online here for us. Margaret, can I see you? Can you talk back to us if you can hear us, if you can see us? Margaret Nagawa from Action Against Hunger, I think, from some civil society organization, Action Against Hunger. Margaret?
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Well, thank you very much. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining the conversation. You're from Action Against Hunger. Let's first get to understand what that means. Can we not have hunger in this country?
Yes, I think it's possible not to have hunger in this country with joint efforts. I have really been hearing your discussion. And in order to ensure that hunger is alleviated, we need to ensure that there is multi-sector response and looking at all levels of society, looking at the political wing, looking at the institutional wing, looking at the community, and looking at the individual who is affected. If we have joint collaboration at all these levels, we'll ensure that hunger is alleviated.
Nagawa, as a non-state actor coming from the civil society organization, what do you think that our governments are not doing right, that they need to do right to ensure that we manage our nutrition and food security in this country and on the continent of Africa?
So I'll start from the good that the government has done and what the gaps are that we can strengthen to ensure that these efforts are really seen. First of all, we appreciate that the government has tried to ensure that there are multi-sectoral policies, like we have the Uganda Nutrition Action Plan that's calling upon different actors in the different sectors. We look at now there's Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Health, and this wasn't seen in the past. And we see that when different sectors come together, we see that there's an improvement of nutrition, because nutrition is not just a health problem, but it could be a WASH problem. We know that 50% of the malnutrition cases are contributed by diarrhea, which directly is affected due to poor WASH and hygiene practices. So this is something that has been done. What I think needs to be strengthened is the dissemination of these policies to the different local governments, so that also the community knows what's happening at national level, and to ensure that these interventions are actually rolled out and to a wider coverage of society. We know that what happens most commonly, we see that most civil society and most organizations are concentrated in specific areas, and we do not see this happening in other areas. We know that in the refugee response, we have many actors in the Karamoja region, but we see that there's also a nutrition problem in the Chor region. And in the Chor region, we know that this is a food basket, but then why do we still see malnutrition coming up? There's also need for the government to look at those areas, look at behavior change, and also look at information sharing to see that all areas of Uganda are adequately covered and malnutrition levels go down and there's adequate food security.
In studios here, I will also respond to, when we talk about food insecurity, we need to appreciate that we talk about a multidimensional problem. We just still battling with the COVID-19 pandemic, which is of course depleting our health systems, challenging our economies, and quite a number of things. And just with that, what needs to be done to ensure that we manage or we get to food security, but also still manage the other bits of the sector, the economy, and of course our livelihoods?
Okay, so for food security, we know that food security is mainly looking at access to food, the physical and economic access to food, and then also availability of food, and then utilization of food at household level. And we know that food security may not directly translate to nutrition security. So in order to ensure that food security is adequately met in Uganda and also Africa at large, we need to look at food. I had the earlier conversation talking about does Africa have enough food? There's actually a report that says that the food that the world produces is actually sufficient, but it's just a distribution of food to different areas that's not really adequately covered. And why doesn't this happen? Because while food might be available, someone might not physically access it, and this might be due to political conflict. We see that in some areas like Somalia, there's a lot of war. Someone might not be able to have food. We know that the markets are disrupted because of this political turmoil. And then also economic access. Uganda has very high poverty levels, and we know that youth unemployment is really high. And those are some of the things that are contributing to food insecurity. And then also availability of the food. Like I mentioned, when war happens, or maybe there's prolonged drought, we've seen it in our sister region in Karamoja region, where there's protracted crisis of food availability not being so sufficient, and they're relying on food aid. Those are some of the things that contribute to food insecurity. And if we understand what the causes are, it's easy for us to address these issues. So if we know that there's political conflict, what are we doing working with other agencies like the UN peacekeeping agencies, having peace talks with the government to ensure that there's political stability so that the economy can develop, and then there they'll be able to plant crops and also to import crops that they cannot be able to attain. And then also unemployment, there are incentives, and this is why we talk about multi-sectoral intervention, looking at the ministries that are responsible for employment. Are there jobs being created for our youth? Are there jobs being created for our women, who are a key player in nutrition and food security, to ensure that food security is adequate, not only at community, but also at household level. And then we also know that while food might be available, the utilization might not actually be adequate, because like we mentioned in Toro region has a lot of food, but it's not being utilized, because while people might be producing food, they might not be consuming the food, they might be selling the food, and that might not be a sustainable approach. So we need to look at all those areas and to ensure that food security is attained.
Right, we'll come back to you. Margaret, very good submission in there. Ndugu Ampe here from the academia. Looking at, of course, the different issues that contribute to that, I just asked Margaret about the multi-dimensional approach to managing this problem. When we look at the conflicts, of course, that have riddled our continent, we look at the policies, we look at the politics, we look at leadership, we look at the health care systems, we look at quite a number of things. Strategic vision, strategic plans for different and various countries and economies. When you look into all the other things, the African Union is grappling with the same thing. When you get to the regional blocks of our continent, the ESC, SADC, ECOWAS, and all the others, these are all things that they're trying to see how to manage. What needs to be done to ensure that we do not lose out on another in the quest of trying to put one thing right in place?
Thank you, moderator. Maybe to respond to your question, I need to inform the listeners of what are the drivers of malnutrition. Can get it from that angle. What are the drivers of malnutrition? And we have seen that number one driver of malnutrition is actually poverty, low incomes. Okay?
SDG number one, no poverty.
Exactly. So that's one of the greatest drivers. So because if you look at all the studies that have been done, and you look at the wealth quintiles, you find that poverty contributes a lot. And we know that in Sub-Saharan Africa, if I can talk about specifically Sub-Saharan Africa, 2/3 of the population derive their livelihoods from agriculture. That's where they get their income. That's the source of food. That's everything. So now, to that extent, it's very, very, very important that governments strategically invest in nutrition, in food production, and all these related sectors. As my colleague Margaret from ACF has said, there are some other variables, like, for example, the water and sanitation and hygiene. They may not be related very much to food, but then they are very, very, very important in ensuring the good nutrition status of the people. So there must be a deliberate effort to invest in those areas. So this at a continental level, if, for example, there is that Maputo Declaration, if it was agreed that 10%
be put into agriculture
of the budgets,
national budgets, be
invested directly in agriculture, then that should be done. But then some of them have been bring diversionary techniques that you see it. We are putting it in the roads. We are putting it in these other sectors which contribute. But the declaration was very clear to put it in agriculture directly, 10%. Then these others can also play their role. So that's something very important, and that's what is happening in Uganda. My colleague has talked about the multi-sectoral approach to solving some of these issues. There is a big project which has just been launched by the Office of the Prime Minister. It is called the Right to Grow. And this project is trying to look at nutrition, hygiene, sanitation, that area, to see how they can bring together these areas and cause development by reducing stunting levels in the children below 5 years. So that's a very good move from civil society working with government, specifically Office of the Prime Minister. But there are some other areas which are also very, very important. We have already talked about food production, about for diets, it's obvious that we need very good diets that are nutrient dense. So all these programs that have been taking place to ensure that they are good, they are adequate diets, that should be that they should be encouraged. Maybe, Mr. Moderator, I need to inform you like about education. It's one huge area whereby it's very important to, if you invest in education strategically and especially in education of women, then you actually reduce malnutrition.
Okay.
Because all our studies have showed that for women who have been educated up to actually beyond P7, so the higher you go in education, then the less malnourished children you get from these mothers who have studied to a certain level. To the extent that a woman who has just finished senior 4, their children will be well catered for. And that shows you
their right to grow is more enhanced.
Exactly. That shows you that there is another issue of access to information. Because education ensures that the caretakers of children have information regarding what kind of foods, what kind of diets are appropriate for children. So that's another area where the governments can invest and then get very good returns. We have already seen studies which have showed that by investing in nutrition, just $1, you get benefits of $16. That's a very high rate of return on investment. $1, $16. All these things, so it means economies can grow very well if specific and strategic investments have been done in this sector. And in fact, if you look at even the cost of hunger study that was done by World Food Program, you'll find that in Sub-Saharan Africa, governments, it is aggregated, they lose $25 billion per year due to nutrition-related issues to do with children illness, to do with the children failing to grow to required levels. That's huge per year. So if proper investments are made in that area, then we can see actually contributions to the economy growing in bounds.
Okay.
Yes, so investments are key. All of these issues we are talking about, even when, for example, food production is high, and then we find some issues to do with the distribution. There has to government must come in and intervene and make sure there are community storage systems. Okay. The good thing is that the parish development model is suggesting to overhaul the system, starting at the parish level, and if it is implemented the way they have put it on the paper, production takes place, and then storage takes place at community level. So that will be a very big,
of course, comes in. We're on the right trajectory.
It will be a big impact.
Okay, Ndugu Joseph from the ministry, we come back to me here. We've had quite a number of good interventions. You remember the PMA, plan for modernization of agriculture. We've had that, and of course, we all talk about putting money in agriculture. Whenever we read our budget, we get to these things and say, why have we put so much money into infrastructure? Why have we put so much money into security? Why have we put so much money into all these things and not put enough money in agriculture? We've tried, of course, as a country from 2003 to where we are now. I think we've improved. We are at about 3 or 4% for our national budgets. But even if we put money in agriculture, let's say we wake up tomorrow and agree as a country that we will move, let's just shoot up from 3% to 10%. What will this money do? Because we tend to create a feeling amongst the people that we are not having enough food. We are not digging because government has not put money into the budget. As if this money is to come and pay Joseph and Tuta and Jagan and every other person to, like some incentive for us to go and do these things. When he was closing down his conversation or his submission, he talked about government putting up systems. And this is the argument, of course, that will come from the political leadership. You want us to put money in agriculture, but you're saying let's build a road. If you have a good road from here to Kabale, then you can actually go and get Irish from Kabale. If you have a good road from here to Buko or Kwen, then you can drive to Kwen and get wheat. If you have a good road from here to Gulu, you can go and get maybe sorghum or anything. What would this money do? Because all of us have a discussion on we're not putting enough funds, we're not putting enough money. But look at all the interventions from the PMA to now, the PDM that we're talking about. What is to be done?
Yeah, thank you, moderator. First of all, I want to agree that as a government, of course, we have challenges in terms of how to put our priorities right. I can't say I doubt the leadership. The leadership has been very supportive in terms of, let me just take you back. And in September 2020, His Excellency.
September
2020.
Just last year.
Yes. His Excellency launched a very important program of agri-food systems. And we were together with the Ministry of Agriculture, Office of the Prime Minister, and FOA, Food Agriculture Organization. And this was to show how they're rallying the country into moving to the direction where even when the resources are available, where do we put them right? Because I can't say agriculture has enough resources, but the question which is very critical, like Doctor has been saying, is where do we put? Because now, like the concept of poverty, how do you look at a poor person in Uganda? You know, poverty. When somebody, let me give you a local example. My grandmother is keeping chicken and having a goat, 2 or 3. But the first thing she thinks about is sell to get money in the pocket. When you go and pick an egg, when a hen is laying, that is a crime. To pick an egg and boil it and eat it.
You're taking her money, you're taking her resources.
This is the wrong concept.
She doesn't feel bad that you've taken the egg.
No,
she
the
feels
whole
bad
thing
that she's depriving her of some money.
It's money, that when you have money, you're rich.
You
but
feel
what
secure.
we are saying, if you have enough food in the home, then it means you are able to have money in the pocket. But you cannot have money when you don't have any food. So the area that we need to emphasize here is, even when the resources come, where do we put them? And that's why I pray that the parish model works out for this country. Because it is going to the household level, and the person is going to have, as a Minister of Agriculture, we are implementing pillar number 1, which is about production, post-harvest handling. And this is very critical, the parish model. Other pillars are coming in. Finance.
Pillar number 1 is production?
Is production and post-harvest handling.
And pillar number 7 is mindset change?
Yes.
Is that so? Why don't you carry them together? Because I think mindset change to me is also very critical.
And that's very important. That's why we are saying if parish model is going to work, then we must launch the pillar number 7, mindset change.
Mindset change.
But we can put a lot of money there. Like I'm here, governments around to collect about 1 trillion and put in parish model. But if we have not prepared the minds of the people and the thinking of what Doctor is talking about, then we are likely to lose. So likewise, we get money into agriculture, but we have bottlenecks. Bottlenecks within, like you said, people getting information, access to information. You know, it's very important. People to know what's happening. Now, like we are talking about, where is our traditional foods we are talking about? We appreciate technology is coming, we are promoting high value yields, but then there is something we need to talk about our traditional foods. And the contents that used to be in these traditional foods that are disappearing all of a sudden. And people didn't seem to see that. The other day somebody was telling me, he picked something which, when I was a little kid, and showed me, do you know this? I said, I can't remember. There were seeds like beans, I can't even remember the name. But he says, these beans, you see, we used to pick them, they are very nutritive.
Okay.
Like, he gave an example. my ndugu there. When you go out, when you buy chicken, actually you are the poor person.
Yes.
The one who goes to buy vegetable, you know, a plate of vegetable, he has money in the pocket.
Yes.
Likewise, it happened to me when I was in Turkey.
Okay.
You know, when you order, it's something to do with meat or fresh, and you don't order. But if you go for vegetables, you must have the money.
You must have the money.
Yes.
Okay.
Here it's different.
Yeah.
It's different. And those are the mindset things that we need to talk about.
When you tell people to feed well here, they think you're telling them to go and buy.
To go and buy KFC. Sorry,
but
talk
yes,
about
right.
KFC.
Yes, exactly.
but
That's the
when they
fact.
tell you they're
Yeah,
eating
it's
sukuma wiki,
KFC.
then those. I'm just worried. It's just a very good conversation. We
you know,
we can't
today
do
the
this.
style of life that makes one to be rich is to go into a KFC and order and carry chicken, which, you know, these things should change.
Finally, Margaret, in just 1 minute, because we are signing out, we want to go to Nakawa at the URA headquarters where Bomb by a Business Summit is also happening. We'll be leaving studios very shortly. Margaret, your final comments in just 1 minute before we get out of studios.
Yes, I think just in addition to what my colleague was saying, when you were asking where should we invest if Ministry of Agriculture was given funds, I think similar to what you said, in line with Pillar 1 and in Pillar 7 for mindset change, but also for production, there's something he talked about in regards to new technologies. I think that's something that should be really looked into, the high yielding, because there's already evidence that shows in other countries where they're already adopting to these new technologies that our farmers are not yet really exposed to. For example, the high-yielding seeds, the drought-resistant seeds. This would really be a dynamic shift if it was rolled across the entire nation of Uganda, but Africa at large, because we know some of our context and our climate in Uganda and Africa is mainly like semi-arid. You see the Karamoja region, and then we also see the northern part of Africa. We see that that's really happening. So if we got those new technologies, irrigation to be scaled up in Uganda and Africa would really see an improvement in the production, but also diversified food security interventions, not only looking at agriculture, but also looking at the livelihoods and also the animals, because some other areas of Uganda are mainly focusing on the livestock, and if also that could be scaled up, and that would also really contribute to improved food security. And then also looking at the food systems approach, not only looking at the time where food is eaten, but looking from the time the food is planted to up to where it's transported. Because if you look at evidence, it shows that 2/3 of the food is wasted from the farm until it reaches the table. So if interventions were also looked around that area to ensure that food loss is really minimal, then we'd see that food security would really escalate.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Margaret. Thank you very, very much. And thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Ngobi. Thank you so much, Mr. Ampe. I'm just worried that time is running out. We are running now to URA, where the Bomb by a Business Summit is actually coming on very shortly, or right now. But I think, well, it's food for thought to all of us. Tomorrow is World Food Day. And we remember very well that the IFAD actually gave us a lot of money, I think in 1998, to do the vegetable oils development in this country, where we try to zone the country to see what can be done where. We went to Buvuma, went to Kalangala, we went to the northern part of it to see. And of course, just the production of vegetable oil alone would be a game changer in this country. And if we do our things right, and if we emphasize the things, then we could be able to manage this. All of us in just 30 seconds to go out of studios.
I thank you, moderator. I had been told they were going to speak up to 11,
Yeah,
so now you are cutting us short without educating Ugandans on these matters. I don't know.
No, we'll find time.
So now, there is something important. As you can see, as we were discussing, we were talking about a situation whereby there is limited food.
Okay.
But you also have a situation whereby people forget and eat more than the body can handle.
Absorb.
And that causes what is called the double burden of malnutrition.
Okay.
You find in a country, and this is prevalent in the whole of Sub-Saharan Africa, you find in the same country, you have high levels of obesity. That is
we eat more than we're supposed to eat,
and then
we overburden
low
the
levels.
body.
So you have the two.
Those actually who do not have anything.
You have
at
the two
all.
occurring together, and that is what? That is a problem.
Okay.
Yeah, so Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ndugu Mtuta. Thank you so much, Ndugu Akol. And thank you so much, Ndugu Joseph Ngobi from the Ministry of Agriculture. And thank you so much, Margaret, from the Action Against Hunger. Action Against Hunger, we thank you so much. Now we'll go to URA for this particular Bomba Ya Business Summit. For God and my country, good morning.
Come up with such discussions to make sure that they not only communicate their policies as a tax body, but also give avenue for different practitioners in their fields of duty to give as much information. Information is very, very key in running a business and also having what you need at your fingertips. So once again, welcome to the 3rd edition of the URA Bomba Ya Business, but also remembering that is that this one is